The Senate Committee on Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions will please come to order. In some respects, the American higher education system has lost its purpose. Many college students are not learning skills needed to succeed in the modern workforce, and studies show that the cost of college is quickly outpacing the value of a student's education. In the last 30 years, tuitions and fees at private nonprofit colleges rose by 80%. At public four-year institutions, they've increased by 109%. Meanwhile, according to a nonpartisan analysis, 23% of bachelor's degree programs and 43% of master's degrees have a negative return on investment. This is to say that students pay more for their degrees than the increase in salaries they can expect. Now, this increased cost often is not going to improve education. Often those dollars are being funneled to promote a DEI ideology, dividing students based on race and ethnicity. A report studying 65 colleges and universities found that the average institution was paying for 45 staff members to promote DEI policies. By the way, these programs are subsidized by taxpayers who contribute significant funding annually for these universities. Instead of promoting academic excellence, many campuses have been ideologically captured, becoming hotbeds of hate and division. Students leave college woefully unprepared for the workforce while being saddled with insurmountable debt that they cannot pay back. Comprehensive reform of higher education is needed. President Trump and Secretary McMahon are making progress, including fixing the broken student loan program, but congressional action is needed to create lasting change. Over the last several years, there have been multiple legislative attempts to improve higher ed to benefit students. This includes my bipartisan College Transparency Act with Senator Warren, which allows students to compare the differences between prospective colleges and a major to see if the value of the degree is worth the cost. Senator Tuberville is leading the Graduate Opportunity and Affordable Loans Act to end Graduate Plus loans, which have been inflationary to tuition costs. This bill puts downward pressure on rising college costs by limiting graduate school borrowing. There's also the Streamlining Accountability and Value in Education, or SAVE for Students Act, led by Senator Cornyn, which streamlines confusing repayment options for student loan borrowers, decreasing the 9 options to 2, giving students and families clarity as to which repayment plan best fits their needs. I look forward to discussing these and other policies in depth today. It is a given, but nonetheless, I emphasize the power of education. It can transform lives, lifting not just the generation that attends college out of poverty, but the subsequent generations in that family as well. It is also a font of life-changing innovation and research, helps develop life-saving cures and define solutions to some of America's biggest challenges. But when universities fail in their basic responsibility to ensure a safe learning environment, when students leave college in debt and without hope for a brighter future, the American people lose trust in higher ed. There's no one who can advocate for higher education better than the institutions themselves. Universities must make the case to the American people as to why they are valuable to the nation and are worthy of taxpayer investment. I thank Taylor University and Tuskegee University for being here. Rarely are HBCUs or religiously oriented universities mentioned in conversations about the landscape of how to improve America's higher education system. We'll also hear from the Austin, Texas Community College District, which offers an interesting perspective beyond traditional four-year universities. A great opportunity for all to share stories of the value you provide. I'll make one more comment. As I mentioned earlier, it's important that everyone has an opportunity to speak to the American people on this important topic. Each person and institution should have the right to make their case. In light of that, it is known, but I will comment upon, that Harvard University have been requested to attend today's panel. Harvard is world famous for its cutting-edge research, which helps make not only our nation but the world healthier. But there have been recent episodes and a recent report on anti-Semitism within Harvard's culture. This would have been Harvard's chance to tell the committee and the country how it is addressing anti-Semitism, removing DEI from priorities, and highlighting their value as a research institution. Unfortunately, they declined the invitation. Thank you again to our witnesses for being here. I look forward to discussing how we can improve higher education so students can succeed in the classroom and beyond. And with that, I recognize Senator Sanders.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and let me thank all of our guests for being here to discuss a very important subject. Needless to say, Mr. Chairman, you and I look at this world a little bit differently regarding this subject. In my view, in a highly competitive global economy, in an economy where technology is changing the very nature of work and the jobs we perform, if we are going to have the kind of standard of living that the American people deserve, we need the best educated workforce in the world. And I would trust there is not a lot of debate about the importance of that. Sadly, that is not the case today. Our nation used to lead the world in the percentage of adults with a college degree. We were number one. Today, despite being the wealthiest nation in the history of the world, we are in 11th place in terms of the percentage of adults with a college degree. We are now behind countries like Japan, South Korea, Canada, the United Kingdom, Ireland, Australia, and Switzerland, among others. Being 11th in a competitive global economy in the number of our people who have college degrees is not a good place to be. Mr. Chairman, we not only must we strive to have the strongest economy in the world, we also need an economy and an educational system which provides for the basic necessities of life for the American people. Yet today in our country, we have an understaffed workforce, something which this committee has discussed, which has led us to massive shortages of doctors, nurses, dentists, pharmacists, mental health counselors, and psychologists. So we're living in a country where in terms of health care, we're not able to even provide the kind of care that our people need. And that is one of the failures of our educational system. Further, at a time when we face major infrastructural challenges and when we need to transform our energy system away from fossil fuel in order to save this planet from the ravages of climate change, we don't have enough engineers, construction workers, plumbers, pipe fitters, sheet metal workers, and electricians because we have not made apprenticeship programs and trade schools widely available. Moreover, Mr. Chairman, I happen to be a strong believer in lifelong learning. Learning is not just a means to getting a good job. As human beings, from 2 to 102, people strive to learn. It's part of what being human is about, and we should make that opportunity available to all. Mr. Chairman, in the early part of the 19th century, not only did low-income and working-class kids not have the opportunity to go to college, many of them were unable to receive a high school education or even a primary school education. Young people at that point were working on farms, they were working in fields, and they were working in factories, often under terrible, terrible conditions. Higher education at that time was available only to the children of the wealthy, mostly boys. Working people and trade unions understood at that time how unfair that was. And they looked around them, they saw the rich kids going to Harvard and Yale, and their kids not getting any education at all. And they fought hard all over this country to say, you know what, we want a public education system free for all kids to the 12th grade. And that was a major step forward for the United States of America. Well, the world has changed just a little bit over the last 100 years. 40 or 50 years ago in Louisiana or Vermont, virtually any state in this country, if you received a high school degree, the odds were pretty good that you would be able to go out and get a decent paying job, raise a family, buy a house, and survive on one income. That was 40 or 50 years ago. Well, that world has changed. Today, the global economy has changed the world, technology has changed, and our educational needs have changed. Anybody here really think that a high school degree is all kids need today? Most people don't. In America today, a college degree is the equivalent in many ways of what a high school degree was a generation ago. Today, the median worker with a bachelor's degree will earn over $1 million more in their career than that same worker with just a high school diploma. But it's not just money. Young people want to get the best education they can so that they can be productive and contributing members of our society. All over this country, I've had the opportunity to talk to young people who did well in high school. It's one of the saddest stories you're ever going to hear. Kids did well in high school, they want to get a college education, but they simply can't afford it. They look at the price tag and they say, no way am I going to go $50,000 or $100,000 in debt. How many wonderful young scientists and teachers do we lose because they can't afford to go to college or don't want to leave? On this committee, school in debt, vaguely talk to people 30. So just other saying that people should be able to so
Introduce our first, wouldn't I correctly, sir? Gillen?
Yes.
Dr. Gillen is a researcher, an independent think tank that advocates for individual liberty, free market. Dr. Gillen is one of the most trusted researchers on higher education, intensively on student loan reform measures and transparency in college outcomes. Thank you for your expertise and sharing it with us, Dr. Gillen. Please proceed.
Chairman Cassidy, Ranking Member Sanders, esteemed members, thank you for this opportunity to testify on these important matters. Testimony has been submitted for the record and cover everything, but I do want to highlight a few key points on the topics of
Mr. Gillen, will you pull that microphone closer to you?
I want to a couple comments on the topics of accountability, affordability, and to federal action improving college affordability is what's called the Bennett hypothesis, which refers to when colleges raise tuition or cut institutional aid when financial aid is provided. So there's a lot of literature that argues that this is happening, but we can fight against it. And so the two most important ways to fight against it are, one, introduce caps on the federal aid program. So things like Pell Grants and undergraduate loans are capped. So we don't need to worry about the Bennett hypothesis too much there. But things like Grad Plus and Parent Plus are uncapped. So to the extent that we keep these programs, it's very important that we put caps on them to avoid colleges kind of undermining the effectiveness of those aid programs. The other thing we can do is adopt what's called the median cost of attendance. And so its own cost of attendance. And so if it increases price by $1, the student gets $1 more in aid. And this link between the college increasing price and the aid eligibility is what's driving the Bennett hypothesis. We can completely neuter that. We can sever that link by using the median cost of college. So you still have each college set its own cost of attendance, but you then determine aid eligibility based on the median among all the colleges. And I would argue that we should do this at the program level rather than the college level, but the concept is very similar. Regarding accountability, most colleges are providing good education at a reasonable cost. But there are too many cases where the benefits from an education do not justify the costs that are being paid by either the government or the student. or parents. So an accountability system would help reduce or completely eliminate this problem. So a well-designed accountability system would do a number of things. So one, it would be focused on programs rather than institutions. So program is like a credential and field of study. So a bachelor's in nursing, that would be a program. It should utilize labor market outcomes. It should be applied universally to all colleges, all programs, rather than selectively. Now, these are concepts that are pretty widely discussed, but there's two that are less widely discussed that I think would really benefit. The first is that we can use carrots too. So all the accountability programs we've ever used in this country have just been sticks. The only thing we've ever threatened to do is take away financial aid. We can use carrots. The carrots could be financial, so it could be performance bonuses, or it could be regulatory relief. So why require a top-performing college to be accredited or to have state authorization? We can waive these regulatory requirements for high-performing colleges. And by using both carrots and sticks, that will introduce a lot of variation in the accountability system that will get us improved performance. The other thing that I think would be really important for accountability systems going forward is to use relative performance rather than a numerical cutoff. So the top 20, 25% of colleges should have different sanctions and rewards than the bottom 25%. Okay, so what accountability metrics could we use? I know people in this on this committee have advocated earnings floors, gainful employment for all. These are all good things. One underappreciated option is repayment rates. This actually makes the most sense. It's the most logical accountability metric for student loans. So we unfortunately have not done much on repayment rates. The last kind of metric that gets a lot of discussion is risk sharing. So risk sharing is the idea that if the student fails to repay their student loans, the college will then be responsible for either all or a portion of it. This is the approach the House has taken, where they've introduced a somewhat complicated risk sharing formula. I would argue that risk sharing formula is actually no more complicated than the gainful employment regulations, which we have implemented for close to a decade here, on and off. So I would argue that it's not too complicated, but we can make it simpler if we want to. Regarding innovation, the main barrier here is accreditation. So accreditation erects giant barriers to entry for new colleges, and it also forces all colleges to use the same recipe of inputs and processes. Both of these really suppress innovation. So to the extent we can reform accreditation to increase competition among accreditors and to make sure they're focused on outcomes, that would lead to vast improvements in innovation. Thank you for this opportunity to testify.
Thank you. I'll introduce Dr. Lindsay. Dr. Michael Lindsay is the president of Taylor University in Upland, Indiana, one of the oldest evangelical Christian universities in the country. He's a trained sociologist with expertise in leadership studies and evangelical engagement in public life, known for his focus on faith-informed leadership, institutional excellence, and civic virtue in Christian higher education. Dr. Lindsay has positioned Taylor as a national leader in preparing students for redemptive influence in society. We appreciate you for joining us today, Dr. Lindsay.
Thank you very much, Chairman Cassidy, Ranking Member Sanders, members of the committee. Thanks for the opportunity to speak today. I serve as president of Taylor University, a Christian institution in the heart of rural Indiana. I begin with a simple observation. American higher education has lost the trust of the people it's intended to serve. The American public watched over several decades as recognized institutions have grown rich but rudderless. Too many have become places that grant credentials without conviction, offering dialogue without direction. And the American public is not impressed. But it doesn't have to be this way. There are hundreds of campuses across this country going in a different direction, and Taylor is one of them. At Taylor, you don't see outrage culture on campus or students walking on ideological eggshells. We have students who are thriving not in the absence of accountability, but actually because of it. Our students, faculty, and staff commit to a shared set of values, which are articulated in something we call our foundational documents. They're not really rule books, but more like roadmaps designed for moral formation and institutional accountability. We place a copy of these documents in our admissions reception room, so prospective families know exactly what we stand for. It turns out moral clarity can actually be a competitive advantage. Our incoming student numbers have grown by more than 60% over the last 4 years. I think that the first thing we want to say is that our sector needs a renewed sense of moral purpose. Higher education should not be where conviction goes to die. Rather, it should be where character comes to life. We also need to redouble our efforts around the important work of what we would call student formation. Too many places have spent years chasing research dollars and reputational rankings, but there are real limits to this particular strategy. What's most needed is just a common sense approach to focus on student learning, student development, and student engagement. We need to look at the kind of communities that we are cultivating. What I love about the liberal arts approach to education is that it encourages relationships and connections across disciplinary boundaries, developing intellectual friendships that go beyond just individual departments. It's part of a larger commitment to the holistic development of students that cares not only about their intellectual formation, but also their professional and vocational, their social, even their spiritual formation. We also need to devote a lot more energy to student learning. At Taylor, we have something called the Beatty Center for Teaching and Learning, and I love that some of my most senior faculty regularly participate in their programming to try and sharpen their skills in the classroom. This should be the norm, not the exception. And we need to look for tangible ways to give students more chances to lead and then support them in that. Most college students don't arrive on our campuses knowing how to be excellent communicators or problem solvers, but they can learn that while they're on our campuses through experiences and through expert coaching. All of this, of course, requires investing in our students. It's why I'm very grateful for the expanded Pell Grant support, because I've seen the difference that it's made in the lives of hundreds of our students on campus this year alone. I'm proud of the way that Taylor has married generous financial aid with strategic cost savings. Since 2010, our average net tuition cost has actually decreased by 24% when adjusted for inflation. And during that same time, we've more than tripled the amount of awards that we give in student scholarships. As you can see in my written testimony, it went from $14 million to over $48 million annually. And many of our peers are doing similarly good work. For every dollar that a student receives in federal aid, member institutions of the Council for Christian Colleges and Universities contribute $5 of their own in institutional aid. It's a model of shared investment that's making a measurable difference in the lives of thousands of students. Third, the mission of higher education cannot stop at the edge of our campus. It actually has to make a difference in the community. That's why Taylor launched what we call the Main Street Mile Initiative. It's a $100 million public and private investment strategy to revitalize our hometown of Upland, Indiana. As you can see from the graphic in my testimony, we're developing more than 100 new units of housing, a collegiate inn and destination restaurant, over 6 miles of new trails. We'll distribute more than $1 million in seed funding for new ventures and help welcome over 150,000 annual visitors to just our little town alone. We're in the midst of a $500 million fundraising campaign, and I'm proud of the fact that we committed 20% of those dollars to benefit not our campus, but actually our wider community. In the process, we're not just transforming Upland, it's actually transforming us, making us a campus that genuinely loves its hometown, and that's something every college in America ought to do. These three touchstones, renewed moral purpose, student formation, and tangible community impact, are the key to American higher education reclaiming its place as the world's most powerful force for human flourishing.
Thank you, sir. And now I'll turn to Senator Tuberville to introduce Dr. Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's my pleasure to introduce our second witness, Dr. Mark A. Brown. Matter of fact, he's about 20 miles from where I live as we speak in Auburn, Alabama. Dr. Brown is the president of Tuskegee University, home of the Tuskegee Airmen. We're very proud of. A historically black college in Alabama. He is the first alumnus in Tuskegee's 143-year history to lead the university. A retired Air Force Major General, Dr. Brown brings unmatched experience in education leadership, federal student aid policy, and HBCU advancement. We are thankful to have you here today to hear your perspective, Dr. Brown.
Thank you, Senator Tuberville. Good morning, Chairman Cassidy, ranking members, and other distinguished members of the committee. I'm Mark Brown, as was stated. I'm the 10th president of Tuskegee. I testify before you as one representative of our nation's 101 HBCUs and as the first alumnus to lead Tuskegee in our 143-year history. Between 1986 and 1990, I personally utilized most forms of federal assistance that we will discuss today. While I am now serving as a college president and retired Air Force Major General, as was stated, I began as an HBCU student who directly benefited from these vital financial aid services. But first, I'd like to introduce you to two recent Tuskegee University ambassadors, and I would ask them to stand. Behind me is Miss Ariel O'Neill from Los Angeles, California. She's a military dependent. Her major is political science, and she is now studying for the LSAT. Next to her is Mr. Tyler Smith. He is from Atlanta, Georgia, by way of Millersville. His major is biology, and his aspiration is to attend medical school. He wants to work in family practice in rural areas. Thank you, Tyler, for being here in Ariel. HBCUs represent just 2.3% of degree-granting universities in the United States. Yet their impact far exceeds their numbers. 40% of all black engineers are HBCU graduates. 40% of all black Congress members are HBCU alumni. 50% of all black lawyers graduated from HBCUs. 80% of all black judges hold HBCU degrees. 90% of undergraduate HBCU students receive some form of financial aid. Reductions in federal needs-based funding would negatively impact 9 out of 10 HBCU students. Today, Pell Grants provide up to $7,395 annually to eligible students. Yet this covers only 31% of cost at an average 4-year public college, compared to 79% in 1975. At Tuskegee University, we recently celebrated our spring 2025 commencement, conferring degrees on nearly 800 graduates across undergraduate and graduate programs. For that same academic year, we processed over $22 million in federal loans, including $5 million in Graduate Plus loans, $10 million in Parent Plus loans, and nearly $5.3 million in subsidized loans. These programs are not luxuries, but necessities for our students. Eliminating or reducing Graduate Plus loans without an alternative would severely limit access to graduate education, particularly for high-need, high-potential students in critical fields. This funding made it possible for students in fields like veterinary medicine, engineering, computer science, to afford not just tuition, but basic living expenses. This is not about dependency. It's about opportunity and investing in futures that will benefit society and our nation. For example, we graduated over 60 new doctors of veterinary medicine just the last couple of weeks, with 100% securing employment almost immediately. With the projected national shortage of 24,000 veterinarians by 2030, Tuskegee's contributions help address critical workforce and national needs. There are economic impacts. According to a 2024 United Negro College Fund HBCU Economic Impact Report, Tuskegee University generates $237.1 million in total economic impact for Alabama. Our institution supports over 2,064 jobs, and for every job created on campus, another 1.5 jobs are created in surrounding communities. For us, that's Highway 85 corridor, about 55 miles between Opelika, Auburn, Tuskegee, and Montgomery. Every dollar spent by Tuskegee generates an additional 43 cents in economic activity throughout our region. Our 2021 graduates alone are projected to earn $2 billion in lifetime earnings, far more than they could have earned without their degrees. In the case of Tuskegee, we are ranked #1 in Alabama for social and economic mobility. Our 81% retention rate demonstrates our commitment to student success, and our outcomes, again looking at the 2025 graduating class, speak for themselves. 44% of those graduates secured full-time employment. 2% pursued graduate school. 7% entered professional school. Others continue into military service, postgraduate work, or volunteer programs like the Peace Corps and Teach for America. 74% of our alumni earn between $50,000 and over $100,000 annually. HBCU graduates earn 57% more in their lifetime than they would without their degrees. That's over $1 million in additional lifetime earnings per graduate. Gainful employment, I will define that the way we define it at Tuskegee. We require an internship, relevant industry certification, and rigorous degree requirements for all students. This approach bridges the gap between classroom learning and workplace demands, positioning our graduates for economic mobility. This model honors our founder, Booker T. Washington's vision of educating the hand, the head, and the heart, making employment outcomes central to the educational journey. Evidence-based programs with transparent historical outcomes should be aligned with federal assistance. Universities should be incentivized to emphasize fields of study that result in positive employment outcomes upon graduation. While we achieve these outcomes, keep in mind we accept 30% of our applicants, compared to other schools who only accept 2% of their applicants. It's a risk-sharing model that fails to recognize the uneven distribution. In conclusion, Mr. Chairman, I ask that you consider with your tough budget decisions an evidence-based approach. Continue reforming the Pell Grant and federal work-study programs to reduce reliance on federal student loans. Incentivize evidence-based gainful employment metrics rather than imposing risk-sharing models that fail to recognize students that begin their educational journey in poverty. Incentivize industry partnerships with HBCUs to bridge the gap between classroom learning and workplace demands. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Dr. Brown. I defer now to Senator Sanders to introduce the next two witnesses.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Our next witness is Dr. Russell Lowry Hart, the Chancellor for Austin Community College District. Under his leadership, Austin Community College District started a free tuition program, which has led to a 40% increase in enrollment. He previously served as Vice President of Academic Affairs for Amarillo College. Thank you very much for being with us, Dr. Hart.
Chairman Cassidy, Ranking Member Sanders, and members of the community, thank you for hosting us. I want to thank you, Senator Sanders, for inviting me to advocate for community colleges, our free tuition program, and to underscore the importance of federal support for our students that are uniquely missing from policy conversations that I hope to illuminate. As Chancellor of Austin Community College, we cover a 7,000 square mile radius. We're larger than the state of Texas, than the state of Connecticut. We serve rural and urban institutions. We serve 70,000 students annually as a comprehensive community college. And yet in the last 12 years, we've not raised tuition once. And Austin Community College and community colleges like us are the reason why I left universities over a decade ago. We're the entity in the sector of higher education where innovation goes to breathe and where I think higher education is actually being reimagined. We're the region's primary workforce education institution. We are proud to partner with our local employers such as Samsung, Tesla, major healthcare partners to launch careers where students can earn a family-sustaining wage. And our moral clarity is a commitment to loving our students to success because this work is personal and the decisions that you do make aren't just political. They change trajectory of lives of neighborhoods and communities. Our average student is named Ashley. We did a naming analysis and Ashley was the most common name in every demographic measurable. But there's nothing common about Ashley. She's smart, she's capable, she's ambitious, but she's not the college student that we often think about when we're making policy decisions. She's a 27-year-old mother. She's working 2 part-time jobs. She's responsible for a kid and probably a family member. She's first generation. She faces significant financial pressures. She's going to school part-time, which means she takes longer to get a degree. She is continually in a state of stress because she is one flat tire or one sick child care worker away from having to drop out of school, which then consign her to a life of poverty when we could offer a few supports at key moments that could open up a life of wealth building for her and the generations that follow her. But her success is built on really important programs such as the free tuition program, Pell, and Child Care Access Means Parents in School, the C Campus program. All of these kinds of federal supports help Ashley and ensure that she's able to overcome the significant life barriers that get in their way. Ashley, like 60% of our students couldn't access $500 in the case of emergency. 48% of our Ashleys are food insecure. 55% of our Ashleys are housing insecure. And according to Alice data, Ashley, living in Central Texas, has to earn at least $60,000 a year just to keep her head above water. That means Ashley has to make nearly $5,000 a month just to get by with rent, childcare, utilities, transportation, basic needs. These aren't insignificant barriers, which is why the financial support is so important and why the potential changes to Pell, especially part-time Pell, could be devastating to her and the generations that follow her. Senator Hawley recently wrote in the New York Times, "Our economy is increasingly unfriendly to working people and their families. This is especially true to working people trying to go to school to get a better job. People like Ashley," which is why the College for All Act could be transformative. But in Central Texas, we're taking Ashley's challenges head on. She does face challenges in affordability, and community colleges are the sector that has taken on affordability with courage. Yet in Central Texas, in the last decade, 60% of our students a decade ago went to post-secondary education. Now only 42% of our students are leaving high school and enrolling. And working with Trellis Strategies, the #1 reason they told us they weren't enrolling is because of the cost to attend college and that they had to get a full-time job. It's one of the most important decisions that our trustees made was to initiate the free tuition program. I'm proud that my board chair, Mr. Sean Hassan, was a leader in this effort. It has dramatically brought students that didn't think higher education was possible back to education. They're staying in school. They're in workforce programs primarily that will lead to a family-sustaining wage. And it's why we're supportive of the proposal that would move 10 millions of people from low-skill, low-wage work into industries that offer real career pathways at a time that our country is challenged in paces of innovation and global economy shifts. And community colleges, if funded appropriately, can be the answer to the global challenges that we seem to be struggling to meet.
Thank you very much, Dr. Larry Hart. A final witness is Mr. Mike Pierce, the Executive Director and co-founder of the Student Borrower Protection Center. He previously worked to defend student loan borrowers as a higher education expert at the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. Mr. Pierce, thanks for being with us.
Good morning, Chairman Cassidy, Ranking Member Sanders, members of the committee. My name is Mike Pierce. I'm the Executive Director of the Student Borrower Protection Center. I also spent 7 years as a federal financial regulator, charged with overseeing the student loan market at the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, serving under both Presidents Obama and Trump. For too long, the promise of a higher education has been pushed out of reach. Rising costs, fueled by unstable state budgets, the diminishing purchasing power of the Pell Grant, the rise in predatory for-profit colleges, have left too many drowning in more than $1.7 trillion in student loan debt. Over the past half-century, we've increasingly privatized our public higher education system, forcing students and families to bear the growing financial burden of what should be a public good. I'm here today to warn this committee about the unprecedented economic shock facing tens of millions of working families across the country, driven by a set of reckless and cruel policy choices made by President Trump. More than 21 million Americans, roughly 1 in 12 U.S. adults, will experience immediate financial harm as this administration pulls back on student borrower protections. These include nearly 8 million people who sought a lower loan payment but remain in limbo, more than 6 million people in default who now face wage garnishment and the seizure of their Social Security benefits, nearly 7.5 million distressed borrowers who are now careening towards a preventable default cliff. These are families that are already contending with a rising cost of living in a moment of extreme economic uncertainty whose only mistake was going to school. Preventing the mass default of millions of distressed borrowers should be the top priority for this administration and this committee. Nearly 6 million people are already 90 days past due, enduring catastrophic damage to their credit. This will cause even borrowers with pristine credit to be locked out of the conventional mortgage market and to see the cost of a car loan double. Crucially for this committee, borrowers in default lose access to Pell Grants and other financial aid, creating an often insurmountable barrier to college completion. Instead of working to diligently get these borrowers back on track, the Trump administration is blocking access to borrowers' rights to affordable repayment options. Today, borrowers are waiting on nearly 2 million unprocessed applications for lower student loan payments. We've been here before. In the wake of the 2008 financial crisis, big banks and loan servicers similarly conspired to block families' access to affordable mortgage payments, based on the mistaken belief that moral hazard would induce waves of, quote, strategic defaults by families across the country. As a result, government efforts to help families avoid foreclosure failed. As many as 10 million families lost their homes. The spillover effects of this financial catastrophe prolonged the Great Recession, and it hurt us all. The Trump administration's actions may cause similar catastrophic harm to the U.S. economy and scar the family finances of a generation of working people. Rather than check the abuses of the executive branch, congressional Republicans appear ready to abuse the reconciliation process to rewrite higher education policy, shrinking access to federal financial aid, cutting or eliminating grants for about 2/3 of Pell recipients, removing guardrails that protect students from predatory schools, and placing enormous pressure on state higher education budgets. The result will push millions of families into the private loan market, and in the same bill, gut the CFPB, the regulator charged with protecting these very same families from predatory student lenders. This legislative war on regulators comes behind an extraordinary attempt to purge enforcement officials across the federal government. I want to express my solidarity with the workers illegally fired by the Trump administration who work to hold student loan companies and predatory schools accountable, a mission in conflict with the Trump-Musk vision of crony capitalism. Building on this foundation, President Trump's proposed skinny budget further slashes critical supports that working families rely on to pay for college. These efforts create a perfect storm that will make students and families even more vulnerable. There remains strong bipartisan agreement that the student loan system is broken. America's grand experiment with debt-financed higher education has failed. While we disagree on what comes next, one thing is clear. Our government should focus on making the markers of middle-class American life, including education, cheaper for students and families. Instead, families are facing extraordinary uncertainty as reckless executive actions and radical legislation push the American dream beyond reach. I want to close by thanking Ranking Member Sanders for his leadership in this fight. We deserve to live in a country where public college is free and there is no student debt, where higher education is an engine of upward mobility and no one is forced to forego their dreams because they cannot afford the rising cost of a college degree. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
We'll now turn to questions, and I will defer to Senator Tuberville to go first.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Gentlemen, thanks for being here. I'm passionate about this. I spent 50 years in education, more than anybody in this room, probably, maybe other than Dr. Brown, although you spent a little time in the military. Been in high schools all across this country, almost in all 50 states. We've gone backwards. Here we're today to talk about higher education, and I spent 30 years in that and done a lot of great things for a lot of kids, men and women, rich and poor. It's got to be merit-based, folks. If we don't merit-base this thing, we will not survive as an educational system. This country gives you an opportunity. I was in a situation where athletics was merit-based. I didn't care who you were. I had to win games. I recruited kids that had good grades, would go to class, and could play football. And if they couldn't do those three things and work at it, I didn't recruit them. It's got to be the same thing in college in terms of getting a good education. I know of a school that has a happiness degree. That ain't gonna get it. I'm for paying everybody's way to college, but not for a degree where when they get out, they can't get a job at Walmart. We need degrees that kids can prosper, then raise a family, and have a great life in this country. So, I'd like to ask each one of you just one question, starting over with Dr. Gillen. Dr. Gillen, what factors do you see that have caused massive skyrocketing costs at our universities across the country?
So I would argue that the main driver of higher college costs is what's called the Bowen revenue theory of cost. And so when you look at higher education, it's the Bowen revenue theory of cost. And so the idea here is that it's not that you know, higher faculty salaries or increases in institutional aid are driving higher spending. It's that It's that when more revenue is available, colleges will spend as much as they can. And it makes sense. These are all mission-driven institutions, right? Like if you give each of these schools $1 million more, they'll find a good way to spend it. The problem is if you keep doing that, eventually those good ways to spend it aren't so convincing anymore. But when we have these mission-driven institutions, the more money they have, the more money they're going to spend.
Dr. Lindsay?
I think the opportunity that's before us is, as you say, to bring accountability and outcomes. And I think we have to be very intentional about the kind of formation that's occurring on our campuses. I'm really proud of the fact we have something called the Good Work Initiative, which is basically trying to transform on-campus employment opportunities where students are paid a little bit more than minimum wage to give them a little bit more spending money, but we also pair it with professional development and vocational discernment exercises to help them so that when they graduate, they actually have that kind of professional experience. It's a pilot. We've had good success with it. We're allowing the opportunity for more students to take on more leadership roles, giving them good things for their resumes, but also buttressing their opportunities when they graduate.
Dr. Brown?
Senator, I'll use a real example. I went to my Board of Trustees this upcoming year and said I would like to freeze tuition for 2 years at our school. They approved the freezing of the tuition. But when I looked at the cost of insurance, which is a subcomponent of that tuition, we had to go up. So the real cost to the customer, the family, was more. The same is true of the cost of dining, the cost of food that goes into a dining hall contract, and the cost of the utilities that it takes to run the campus. So my campus is much like any other business. Those costs we would not be able to absorb. And so our costs went up because cost in the economy went up. It was not that we would spend more because we had more. Those costs were real, and we had to realize those as a school operates just like a business in that sense.
Dr. Hart?
Thank you for the question. I would say in the community college sector, there hasn't been a massive skyrocket rising of prices. At Austin Community College, we haven't raised tuition in 12 years. I think we've raised it once in 15. We're the sector of higher education that lives within our means because our students are so price sensitive. And I think there could be a lot to learn from how community colleges effectively manage their budgets.
I agree with you on that. Been in a lot of community colleges. You do a good job, by the way. And I think more kids need to go to community colleges. Mr. Pierce?
I think it's my turn to talk about for-profit colleges, which seems to be missing from my colleagues' responses to your question. We have watched the proprietary sector raise costs far in excess of other sectors of the higher education system. And we've also watched some of the largest participants in the for-profit college market turn into private nonprofit colleges or enter into deals with public colleges. So I think we're not in a place where we were a decade ago talking about the proprietary sector. We should be looking at the backroom deals that some of the largest colleges in the country are cutting with these private companies and how these deals are driving the increase in costs that are being pushed on our most vulnerable students.
Good. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Sanders.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you all for your testimony. I believe that all of you mentioned Pell Grants, and I think the elephant in the room, as many of you know, right now there is a Republican-led so-called reconciliation bill which will provide massive tax breaks to the very rich and cut programs that working families need. And one of the programs that is being cut are Pell Grants. Where we are right now, the bill is in flux, but right now it would eliminate, this Republican bill would eliminate Pell Grants for 1.4 million working class students and substantially reduce Pell Grants for 3 million low-income students throughout America. That's what that bill does. Dr. Brown, what does that mean for Tuskegee?
Thank you, Senator Sanders. The vast majority of our students use Pell Grants. If you reduce Pell Grants, you will probably increase the amount used in student loans. If you cap access to student loans and at the same time reduce Pell Grants, you will hurt access to education for those who begin their educational journey in poverty or with significant need.
Dr. Brown, if you could convey that message to Republican members of Congress, I would appreciate it. Dr. Lowry Hart, what would that do to students at your community college?
Over 75% of our students at Austin Community College are part-time because they're working 2 part-time jobs and raising a family. If the proposals to increase part-time Pell went into place, there are 5,000 Austin Community College students right now that are taking between 6 and 7 hours that would lose Pell access, which means the workforce programs that they're engaged in, they might have to drop out of or withdraw from.
Okay, thank you. I don't have
yeah.
a lot of time. Dr. Lindsay, what does that mean for Taylor?
Pell is an incredibly important catalyst for hundreds of our students, and the expanded Pell has made a tremendous difference. I've worked directly with students, I've seen how it has actually allowed them to be able to come to Taylor and to be able to stay at Taylor. It's a huge differentiator, and I think all of us recognize the key difference that Pell has made.
All right, do I hear the three folks who are running universities think that these kind of massive cuts in Pell Grants would have a very negative impact on the lives of your students? Am I hearing that? I am hearing that. All right, Dr. Larry Hart, talk a little bit. To me, education is a human right, like healthcare. Whether you're rich, poor, young, old, I think you should be entitled to it. And I think as an investment for our country, wanting the best qualified, the strongest possible and best educated workforce, it makes sense to encourage all of our people. I understand you have a young man who wants to go to medical school behind you. Dr. Brown, I don't know what his financial circumstances are, but if he doesn't have a lot of money, he will graduate medical school many, many hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt at a time when we desperately need primary care physicians. Dr. Larry Hart, what has been your experience in providing free tuition for the students in the Austin area?
It's been transformative for the families that we serve. Our enrollment has returned to pre-pandemic levels. Our students are now enrolled in workforce programs that will lead to a family-sustaining wage. We saw a 40% increase in enrollment based on the free tuition program, and it is already producing outcomes in increased retention and success in the classroom.
So what I'm hearing from you is the investment that has been made in those students is going to pay off in a whole lot of ways.
Yes, the ROI on this is undeniable. Every economist will tell you that education attainment is the biggest predictor of which communities are going to succeed or fail. And right now in Austin, we're importing talent from all over the globe, and we need to be investing in our own local students, and the free tuition program is helping us do that.
Mr. Pierce, what is your sense of what free tuition would mean to working class families in this country?
It would mean widespread economic opportunity. And it's not just for those families that are going to be able to get a job with a family-sustaining wage. It's for all of us. Our communities are better off when we have more education. There's more innovation. There's better jobs. There's an economy that we built in the middle of the 20th century that was the envy of the world. We get back there by educating our workforce.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
My turn. Dr. Brown, you've written about the challenges facing the Parent Plus program and pointed out that HBCU students and parents rely on Parent Plus, but sometimes it saddles the family with debt they cannot pay. And so that which is extended in compassion becomes a shackle keeping them from growth. Can you comment on that, please? And those are my words, not yours, but I feel just as passionately as you.
Yes, Senator Cassidy, I agree that the Parent Plus loans and loans in general create a financial burden on students that is not sustainable. Specifically, if a family has an estimated family contribution of 0 and then you extend a Parent Plus loan to that family, what's the likelihood that that family will, with any reason, be able to pay it? But it's a far more complex question than that, because if you remove those loans without an alternative, history tells us that that stops access. And so I think if we go back to the founding of the whole Title IV program, this was supposed to be solved within the Pell Grant part of the program and not within the loan part. The loans create a debt trap. It creates and takes away the social and economic mobility that is intended of education. So I wish we did not need the loans at all. But until we do something to reform the level of Pell Grant, it ends up being the difference in access. And I will offer one more example. In 2011, when there were credit changes to the Parent Plus loan system, we saw immediately a decline of around 3 to 4% of students who attended HBCUs, while enrollment was going up at other schools. And so, in a sense, we made education available for the elite, and we did not make education available for the masses.
But the Parent Plus program, again, as we have, I'm looking at some statistics. I understand that about a 34% borrow more than the $50,000 cap being proposed. I've heard stories of people borrowing for multiple kids, and they end up just incredible debt. They're drowning in debt from this. So I think what you're saying is that there needs to be another way to finance it?
I'm saying it's the wrong tool for social and economic mobility. The loan is the wrong tool, but it is the only tool unless there's an alternative to make sure you ensure access. Okay. So it's definitely the wrong tool for, you don't give a person who can't make a payment a loan. You instead would do a different tool. And again, I believe that the intent of the original Higher Education Act was to fix this within the Pell Grant program.
Gotcha. Dr. Lindsay, there's been a lot of conversation about the lack of moral clarity on college campuses and about tolerance of incivility that then becomes violent, and about counseling people with different views. Now, you're a Christian organization, and I imagine there'd be very noxious views, and so there's a tension there, the counseling versus the moral clarity. In your experience, because obviously your enrollment is growing, you're doing very well. How do you manage that tension between some viewpoint which might be noxious to your theology, but at the same time having moral clarity?
I think fundamentally we believe that all truth is God's truth, so we're not afraid to engage on difficult topics or difficult issues. I was on the faculty of a Research One university for a number of years, and I would say at Taylor, I feel like we have more freedom to engage on difficult or contentious topics than I ever faced on that Research One campus. I think part of what happens is that when you're part of a community that has a shared set of moral commitments, which we do, it sort of creates a degree of freedom within a framework of faith. And we have found that our students really thrive with the opportunity. We want our students to be really well equipped to engage all of the pressing issues. And they're not simple answers. We know that. So you've got to be able to engage those variety of concerns in a thoughtful and deliberative way.
So if somebody came advocating for polygamy, they could speak, but it'd be in the context of an audience which had a well-grounded sense of moral clarity.
We have students who are incredibly thoughtful about their theological commitments and how it informs their academic pursuits. We welcome any speaker to come to our campus. I think they'll find that our students are engaging, prepared, and bring a degree of clarity to the pressing moral issues we see in our day.
Dr. Gilliam, Dr. Brown just spoke about, okay, we know that these Parent Plus programs really end up burdening people with tremendous debt. And you made the statement that sometimes increased revenue is spent, but there's diminishing return in terms of the benefit, however you define the benefit. But he said, if you cut the Parent Plus, then how do you replace it? There's a tension there. Please, from your perspective, how is that tension addressed?
Yeah, absolutely. So I totally agree that the Parent Plus is the wrong tool to try and address this problem. I actually had a paper out that argued we should get rid of Parent Plus and increase Pell Grant to make up the gap that parents were contributing to their students' education. So that's one option is increase Pell Grant. Another option is just rely more on the private sector to do that lending, because the main problem with the Parent Plus loan right now is that they are not doing kind of credit checks, and so you're giving parents who can't afford the debt a huge amount of debt, whereas private lenders wouldn't make those loans. So they're not going to get repaid.
You're not disputing that they might need the money. You just think there's a better, more wise way to finance it.
Correct.
Okay. Senator Hassan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Ranking Member Sanders, for this hearing, and to the panel, thank you all for really clear and compelling and interesting testimony. And I think it's really important, just framing this a little bit. For a lot of time, the debate about higher education since I've been here is about either we should increase scholarships, and I agree, actually we should expand Pell more for all the reasons many of you have talked about. And I also am very concerned about the current Republican congressional proposal to cut back on Pell and make it harder for working students in particular. But it is also true that we should make higher education less expensive and have more alternatives for students as we move forward. So since I've been here, I've focused a lot on bipartisan ideas that would actually just help us lower costs for students and make higher education more accessible. So I want to get at a couple of those things with all of you this morning. And I want to start with you, Mr. Pierce, because one of the things we have to start with is how difficult the FAFSA process is right now. We can all agree that the rollout of the simplified FAFSA could have and should have gone a whole lot better. Students and institutions deserve a well-functioning FAFSA process and expert staff to turn to in the Federal Student Aid Office when in need of assistance. However, the Trump administration announced in March that it was slashing Department of Education personnel by half. Within 24 hours after those rifts were announced, the FAFSA site was down for several hours. So, Mr. Pierce, how has the administration's chaotic and arbitrary cuts at the Department of Education impacted operations, and are there concerns that the agency will be able to fulfill its legal obligations without adequate staff?
We are already watching the Office of Federal Student Aid come apart at the seams. There was a new study put out just this morning by the National Association of Student Financial Aid Administrators, the trade group that represents school financial aid offices. They surveyed their members, and they found that nearly 60% of school financial aid offices already report delays and difficulty getting somebody on the phone at the Office of Federal Student Aid. That comes at a moment where we've just survived a disastrous financial aid cycle, where students and families are scared they won't be able to figure out how to navigate our complicated financial aid system. This is the wrong time to cut staff.
Thank you. Dr. Lowry Hart, I want to talk about credit transfer costs, which sounds kind of arcane, but actually, according to research by Southern New Hampshire universities, is a real issue. Students who transfer to a public four-year institution lose on average almost half of their credits, the credits that they've already accrued when they transfer, and the overall cost of transferring is about $13,000 when you include lost credits, transcript request fees, and a whole lot of other things. In addition to financial costs, students lose valuable time and are less likely to complete their degree. This is just one of the ways that college is too expensive. So what more must be done to remove credit transfer barriers, and is there a role for the federal government to play here?
Well, first of all, I think community colleges actually make the attainment of a bachelor's degree more affordable.
Yeah.
2 years plus 2. It is going to require higher education to align itself.
Right.
In Austin, we've aligned with Texas State, the Bats to Cats program, with St. Edward's University, a Catholic institution, faculty-to-faculty alignment to ensure no credit loss.
Right.
Scholarships waiting for them, data sharing, advising those students to the university degree plan from day one. Those are things that aren't just best practice, they should be required.
Right, I appreciate that. And Senator Young and I have last session introduced fast track to and through college. And one of the other things we could do is align high schools who've got students ready to do college level work so that the students are doing work in high school, getting those credits in place. Now maybe to get your bachelor's, you only need to go 2 or 3 years to higher education. Dr. Lowry Hart, also, I just wanted to talk to you about borrower education and transparency. One common sense step that we can take to help drive down student loan debt and increase consumer transparency is by making sure that the student financial aid process is clear and easy to navigate on the front end. Senators Grassley, Smith, Tuberville, and I have reintroduced the Understanding the True Cost of College Act, which would create a financial aid offer form so that students can more easily compare financial aid packages between schools and determine what's the best fit for them. How will reducing the complexity of the federal financial aid system and empowering students with information on the front end help students access and afford college?
First of all, please make that happen.
Okay.
It is one of the biggest barriers, especially when you're talking about first-generation college students who may not have familial support to make sense of the bureaucracy.
Right.
It's why at Austin Community College, we do a financial literacy requirement before students sign. Any loan or even scholarship, it is a very cumbersome, difficult process to articulate for people that don't have experience with it.
Yeah, and even for those of us who do, shepherding students through it and children through it is a challenge. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
And I will note that under Chairman Alexander and Ranking Member Murray, this body pushed to make FAFSA more understandable. the work that had been done in Trump 1 was discarded by Biden's administration, and they never could meet their deadlines. So unfortunately, Trump 2 is having to rebuild from something which was a disaster.
Yeah, it's something we should be able to work on together, all of us.
Yes. Senator Marshall.
All right, thank you, Chairman and Ranking Member, and welcome to our guests. The student that the Ranking Member spoke about was me. I was the student that graduated first in a class of 200, had ACT scores that were really good. I applied to Kansas State, Kansas University, thinking this is where I'm going to go. But I would have had to borrow money to do it. So instead, I chose a community college. Near as I could tell, Calc 1 was Calc 1, Comp 1 was Comp 1. And my point I'm trying to make is everybody makes decisions. And part of it should be financial. I sat here and looked this up a second ago. The tuition at a community college on average, $5,000 a year. A state university, $12,000. If you're going to an out-of-state university, it's $30,000, and a private school is $43,000. So that first year in community college, I spent $5,000. Well, I spent way less than that, but today you'd spend $5,000 versus $43,000. And I would note that the cost of living typically in community college cities is a lot less than the big university cities as well. So I think the question is, at what point should the federal government reward people for making financial decisions that they should be responsible for? But it's a lot more than just choosing the school. Students today, they're told to take 5 years to go to college, when it should easily be done in 4 years. One way you can do that is to rack up some credits in high school. It's why we support the Perkins grants as well. So maybe you enter, a lot of students today have the opportunity to enter that first year of college and already have a semester underneath their belt. So I think that's a false narrative out there, that it should take 5 years. I made decisions through my whole life on whether to borrow money or to work. So I worked part-time jobs in high school, community college, med school, even residency. I worked part-time jobs rather than borrow money. When we had our first child in medical school, I chose to join the Army Reserve as opposed to borrowing money. And I understand that some people are going to do better in a private college. Knock your socks off. Some people are going to do better. I just can't imagine that student that couldn't do just as good at a community college. And somehow financial literacy should be important to making that decision. And of course, Dr. Lowry Hart, you're my community college person here. Do your kids struggle when they go on to universities and on to med school? Or was it okay that they started there at a community college? And how much money did they save?
Well, depending on where they went, the level of savings will vacillate, but they all saved money starting in a community college. And the data is pretty clear, and my colleagues will affirm if they go back to their IR shops, community colleges that transfer to universities perform at or better than students that originated at those universities. They're well prepared. And it's because of what you just mentioned. Calc 1, Comp 1 are the same. The difference at a community college is they're being taught by a master's or PhD prepared experienced teacher, not a graduate assistant. And so I think the instruction in those basic courses are better at a community college because our faculty are more experienced in teaching in those areas. And the dual enrollment piece, Senator Marshall, is really critical. It can be a solution for making college more affordable. It was for my own 3 kids, all of which went to a community college before university. The challenges for the millions of adults that need to come back and upskill and how they can afford it while still working is why I think Pell eligibility is particularly important.
Just speak a little bit more about the flexibility of a Pell Grant. More and more, the great paying jobs, if we can just get them in the door for 6 or 8 hours at a time, how important would that be to you?
really important. There are level 1 certifications that can lead to a family sustaining wage. And those students can enter that profession, whether it's at Tesla or Samsung, work for 6 months, come back and get the next level of certification. Those stackable credentials are what will change their families' generations to come, but also ensure that our communities are able to meet the moment that we're in economic challenge that we have.
And I'm sure you don't have to answer this question, I need to wrap up, but you see time and time again the story of a person that came back in a year or two and continued that education, and that particular person ends up being just the superstar on the job site. So thank you, Chairman, and I yield back.
Senator Kim.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I actually want to start by something that you had raised in your remarks, which is that, part of this conversation is about what value does education give to our nation? How do we make education that is valuable to our country? And I think that idea of value, we have to keep in mind, it's not just about the cost and the price tag. And I guess I just want to address this issue about risk sharing. So I'm trying to comprehend this a little bit more in my mind in terms of how do you hold a college, university responsible for, in many ways, some of the personal actions and decisions that a former student could be making, whether or not they can pay back their loans. Dr. Brown, I guess I just want to ask you, I mean, you've talked a lot about just the holistic challenges facing some of the students that are at your institution. What are the different factors that you can imagine would affect an ability for a former student to pay back loans? I would imagine it's not just about the wages, certainly that's part of it, but also about healthcare costs that they might have, emergencies. What are some of the other things you could imagine?
Well, Senator, just to be clear on risk sharing, at our school, we accept 30% of our students that apply. Some schools accept 2% or 3%. And so there is a mission of the historically black college and university to serve a larger swath of the country. Mm-hmm. The economic outcomes, as I said earlier in my statement, are significant. They do better. They achieve social and economic mobility. However, I think the biggest threat to paying back loans are those students who don't complete college. Yeah. And I think the data will support that. And the reasons that they don't complete college are often related to a lack of finances. And so again, I would ask that as we consider formulas for risk sharing, you also consider that the risk is not equal among colleges. And if you decide that you will service a larger group, then your risk is obviously going to be higher. The return for the country, however, may be, and I think the data supports this, far greater when you look at the social and economic mobility and the earning power of those students who you took a risk on.
When you're looking at this issue about risk sharing, I mean, to the point you mentioned, I mean, I could see a potential consequence of this being such that, schools may be less, I guess maybe they'd be more hesitant perhaps to admit certain types of students if they have lower economic backgrounds, other types of potential concerns that they might have in terms of the ability for that person to be able to pay back loans. I know there's some talks about offsets there, but Dr. Brown, would that potentially be something that could be an unforeseen consequence?
I think an unintended consequence, and I'm sure it's unintended, but it could happen, is that we become more selective on who we allow to enter school. And that probably should not be the basis for entering college. If someone comes from a low-income or first-generation college students, like many HBCUs service, you would not want that to be a determining factor if you would allow that person to enter college, because your risk goes up. And nor do I believe that HBCUs would do that, given our historical mission of serving those very students.
Yeah, Dr. Galen, I wanted to just go back to you, just got to get your perspective on this. I am having trouble understanding how it is that we try to single out colleges and universities in terms of that risk when, there's so many other issues. I mean, some of the people I've talked to that struggle to pay back their loans because their parents got sick or they have kids and challenges on that front. Like, there's so many different factors that affect. How do you try to go about teasing that out?
Yeah, absolutely. So those types of factors will tend to be sort of randomly distributed among all colleges. And so if you do kind of like the median random life disasters exemption, I think you account for most of that. What I think the big value of the risk sharing proposals are is it makes it so that the college cannot profit from offering an education that leaves the student and the taxpayers worse off. Because right now they can, because they get all that tuition money up front. They get to keep that even if the student never repays the loan. And so that to me is the big advantage of the risk sharing is weeding out that portion of the higher education sector. But yeah, you're absolutely right. Like there's gonna be random life circumstances, and I think if you do like a general small exemption, like 3%.
Yeah. So I mean, look, I just want to just share, just how, how much this could be very damaging in a lot of different ways, and the unintended consequences as mentioned. The other thing I would just want to raise in my final seconds here is just, I think it also has the potential to threaten just the threaten and undermine our tradition of liberal arts education as a whole as well. I mean, part of what we have really profited by in this country is the creativity, the innovation. Not necessarily, I've studied in other countries and seen how they're much more driven towards just specific careers. But I think we benefit from the education, the creativity that's out there. And if we're moving in a direction, I could see how this type of action could potentially put colleges to say, we're going to start to divest in our humanities programs, arts programs, and other things like that, if that's going to, not be as profitable or be a greater risk that we have bringing on those types of students. So I just want this committee to be mindful of that as we proceed along. With that, I'll yield back, Mr. Chair.
Senator Moody.
Thank you, Chairman Cassidy, and thank you to our witnesses for taking time to be here away from your families and jobs. This is an important hearing from our earliest beginnings as a nation. Access to education was seen as a fundamental bedrock for the sustainment of a republic governed by a free people. And our founders and subsequent generations knew that if we educated our populace, one endowed with virtue and knowledge, that was incredibly important to continue the fierce protection of our rights and our liberties and ensure the strength of this country from one generation to the next. And in time, it led to more Americans having access to education, to pursue college, improve not only their lives, but the lives of their children. And as a result, our nation, our economy, the prestige of our institutions of higher education grew too. However, in recent times, we've seen our institutions move away from or even fail in the original basic mission. Students are graduating with higher amounts of debt, with degrees that are sometimes not even useful. In some cases, they even have a disdain for the very principles and ideals needed to continue this great experiment in self-government. Further across the country, colleges and universities in many instances have failed in their duty to protect students from harm and to foster intellectual debate and growth of availability of ideas. Instead, they've, as we have seen play out in the media time and time again, they have allowed protests to erupt in violence, buildings to be overrun, all while our tuition across the nation continues to rise. In Florida, we have shown that this does not have to be the case. In fact, we undertook very aggressive efforts to ensure that our students were protected, and at the same time, we've made sure that we are demanding higher education funding is tied to performance, guaranteeing accountability and outcome improvement. I would like to brag on our own FIU that received an A from the Anti-Defamation League in combating anti-Semitism, as our state continues to make strides to ensure our students are not only equipped for success in the workforce, but also equipped to live full civic lives in this country. In innovation, my alma mater, the University of Florida, the champions of the basketball world are coming to Washington today. Go Gators. They're helping to lead this nation in AI development. And finally, our colleges and universities, whether it's the University of Central Florida, the University of North Florida, or Florida Tech, they're cooperating with local employers and partnerships to ensure their curriculum evolves with workforce needs, leading to more successful outcomes for students. And with that said, I would like to turn to our witnesses for a few questions. And I'd like to start with Dr. Lindsay. You've acknowledged the role of higher education and how it plays in the formation of the individual and instilling virtue along with the sense of a civic and societal responsibility grounded in faith and community. And I believe these are traits that we are sorely missing today. However, at the same time, with efforts to bring advanced manufacturing back to the U.S., we need to ensure that our students are equipped to meet the job requirements, not only that are in demand right now today, especially as this administration is really bolstering American businesses and bringing those jobs back, but also the demands of the job markets of the future. How do you view the relationship between the two societal needs? Do you believe that they are in tension, or through your work and experience, is there a way to meet both the needs without sacrificing one or the other?
At Taylor, we certainly believe that you can instill a sense of civic mindedness, a service over self, and at the same time preparing students for the jobs that might be out there. I mean, the interesting thing is that 2/3 of my freshmen will pursue careers that have not yet been invented. So we need to have a degree of intellectual agility. The liberal arts idea that Senator Kim was mentioning is what actually prepares them for a dynamic workplace environment. At Taylor, we've certainly found that our students can marry a commitment of civic mindedness and developing virtue, and at the same time getting the intellectual and professional development that will serve them well, not just for the first job they take, but for the rest of their lives, being contributing members to their communities, to their professions, and for the wider world.
And if balance is possible, what are some steps that other universities and colleges could take now to meet the approach that you're taking, but ensure there is balance there?
I mentioned how important I think it is for us to be really committed to loving our hometowns. And that's a simple way in which you can get students involved with both volunteering through local nonprofits, but also interning to solve problems that the private sector has in your local community. It gives students professional experience, but also deep engagement in their local community.
So you heard it, Chairman Cassidy. We have to learn to love our hometown, including D.C.
Somehow I think Dr. Lindsay is a sociologist. You know what I'm saying? I mean, it's just coming through, man, just coming through. When the Major General makes these guys do push-ups behind him, we'll have him declare it. Senator Hickenlooper.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank all of you for your work on behalf of the future generations of this country. I want to ask a couple different questions, and maybe I'll go down the list. At one time, or various times, there's been talk of a website that would actually allow prospective students to see of any university, or as best estimated it could be, and there'll be a large battle of this, what kind of earnings they could achieve based on what they studied. And these are averages, and I think there would have to be qualifications on that. So I want to ask each of you just to very briefly kind of give a thumbs up or what's a real concern about that. I recognize the limitations. And then tied into that, there's also from time to time been efforts to allow students future loans to be able to declare bankruptcy. What would happen if you took away that right that lenders are looking for to make sure they can get paid back? And obviously you would probably decrease access. I recognize that, but I postulate those two questions. What about the website that to the best ability tries to give prospective students a vision of what they can earn in the future? Why don't you start down at the end with you, Mr. Gillen?
Yeah, so I think that's a great idea. We do have an early version of this. It's the College Scorecard website. You can look up by college and major what the earnings of graduates are. So there's some limitations there because not everybody graduates. But I think that's a great start. We can build on it. I think it's borderline criminal that we don't also tell them, okay, what jobs do they get? Like, do the veterinarians graduates, do they work as vets? Or are they working somewhere else? Not that that's necessarily bad, but definitely a great idea. And then in terms of the second...
Quickly, because
okay.
But that's okay. You've got what?
So the second question was about loans?
No, the second question, could they declare bankruptcy on loans?
On loans?
Yes.
That's a great question. So I would argue no for now,
Okay.
But I would put a cap on it. So I'd basically say you can't declare bankruptcy the first few years after graduation because nobody has any assets. But after a few years,
okay. Great. Dr. Lindsay?
I changed my major 4 times in college, and I think most people do. Oftentimes, you choose a major not just because you're interested in the field, but you choose it because you love the faculty. And so I'm not a huge fan of saying that what you major in necessarily is the predictor of what your life success will be or the earnings that you'll have in that. I did a study of 550 senior leaders, and I found 73% of them actually majored in a liberal arts field, even though most of them were working in business later. So the major is not directly the predictor of what your long-term success is, but I think it's important for us to be more transparent of the outcomes that our students are getting, and that's what I think you're trying to get at.
Right, and certainly if you're switching majors, wouldn't be bad to have that website to see, all right, even though I really like this faculty, what's my future like? Dr.
Yes,
Brown.
Senator, absolutely. I believe we should have to show students what the average earnings are in that region for the degree that they choose. I think that's a big deal. It's not just for that. There may be some majors, and I'll use teaching as an example, where we have people who want to be teachers, but we all know full well those teachers will not necessarily earn the same thing as compared to others. In terms of your second question on bankruptcy, I believe there are catastrophic things that happen in the lives of everyone, and so student loans, like any other kind of debt, should be eligible for bankruptcy.
Interesting.
Career and labor market outcomes are critical. We infuse those into our first advising session with our community college students. A national model would be exceptional. It just needs to be reflected of the community and what's happening in the economy in that local community. I think it also needs to be reflected back to the programs themselves, where they know what their student outcomes are and can adjust their curriculum to be responsive to it.
And then bankruptcy?
I'm going to leave that to the policy experts.
Oh, now we're Mr. Pierce.
Well, then I'll take my cue and I'll start with bankruptcy and say restoring people's rights to bankruptcy is vital. We've had a decades-long experiment denying people bankruptcy rights, and it's resulted in people staying in debt for decades into retirement. The government is required to chase people down and take their Social Security checks. Having an exhaust valve in the student loan system makes people get a fresh start and live whole economic lives. I would also note, just building on what I think I agree with what everybody else said about the value of data and shopping and transparency. The Trump administration has fired the statisticians responsible for managing the college scorecard. We are flying blind now.
Wow. That's very sobering. Well, I'm out of time, but I'm not out of questions. I will maybe come back for a second round later, or I will submit them in writing, but I appreciate your work. For the record, I switched majors 3 times. I got a degree, undergraduate degree in English and creative writing, and I sucked as a writer, so my friends pointed that out to me. So that I ended up going back and getting a master's in geology, which is a pretty steep, but having a better understanding along the way would have, I think, been of value to a lot of students. I yield back to the chair.
Senator Hickenlooper, Senator Warren and I have the College Transparency Act. You should be a co-sponsor. It does exactly that which you were saying we should be doing.
I am.
Super. Well, thank you.
We younger junior senators don't always get the notice and appreciation that we deserve. But
let's get Kane and Blunt Rochester and these guys too.
Thank you.
Next is Senator Hawley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks to all of the witnesses for being here. Dr. Lindsay, I want to start with you. You lead at Historically Christian College. We have a number of faith-based, including explicitly Christian colleges, universities in Missouri, which we're very, very proud of. In fact, I think you mentioned College of the Ozarks in your opening testimony, which is right where I live. And we're extremely proud of College of the Ozarks, as well as our other religious institutions, Christian institutions. Let me just ask you about the challenges that Christian colleges and universities have faced, particularly in the last 4 years. I've heard from our institutions in the state of Missouri that under the last administration, they had major problems with accreditation. They had problems with financial aid. They had problems getting certified in various programs. We had threatening letters sent from the Department of Education to numerous of our religious institutions. We're talking about colleges and universities that have been around for 100 years or more in the state of Missouri, our Baptist universities, our non-denominational universities. So can you just speak to the headwinds that Christian colleges and universities have faced and the importance of preserving this distinctive form of education in this country?
Yeah, thanks very much, Senator Hawley. I think one of the key challenges all of us face are the sort of demographic challenges. We're in a competitive landscape and needing to be able to recruit the right kind of students. But the particular challenge we face at faith-based schools is not everybody understands our commitments and understanding, and they make assumptions about what kind of students we have or what kind of campus cultures we build. But I find that when people actually come to our campuses, they actually fall in love with the students. They see that this is a place that really is trying to help students to thrive and to do well. You are right that the regulatory environment can be challenging and that there are certain actors in the political landscape that can make it more challenging. I'm grateful for progress that we've been able to make in recent years, which has made it easier than it was, say, 10 years ago. But it is a real particular issue, and I think all faith-based institutions have to do a better job of making the case of the difference that they make in their local community. I think as people begin to see that we're not enclaves, but we're actually trying to serve and bless our local communities, that's the key of making the difference.
Let me ask you about this piece of legislation that I'm proud to co-sponsor called the Equal Campus Access Act,
which ensures that religious student organizations can operate in accordance with their faith-based principles, and it would prohibit funding for public institutions of higher education if they deny rights or benefits or privileges to faith-based student organizations. Now, obviously, you are a faith-based institution, but wouldn't you agree, as a person of faith and as someone who educates people of faith, many of whom will go out and probably teach in public universities, that it is important that if you are a person of faith, whether you're leading a university, whether you're teaching in a public university, that you are accorded the same rights and privileges as everybody else? There's no discrimination on the basis of faith. It's a bedrock principle. Wouldn't you agree with that?
Well, certainly we recognize public institutions have a particular obligation to uphold the constitutional right for freedom of speech and a recognition of clear conscience, free conscience. And so it seems antithetical to the very premise of what we're trying to inculcate in our students at public institutions if the students are not allowed the opportunity to organize around their religious convictions and to be able to have a chance to express those. It has had a chilling effect on many campuses as overzealous administrators have said that they're going to try and shut down some of the activities of faith-based groups. But I think that there's a real hopeful opportunity, and certainly I support the expression of those constitutional rights, public and private institutions.
Very good, and I just want to come back to the first point that I made. I think it's absolutely vital that we do everything we can to protect Christian colleges, universities, and their rights to exist and educate students on an equal plane with every other form of university. The truth is, in the last 4 years, we saw a constant effort to undermine the mission of Christian colleges and universities by the Biden administration. And I'm glad that the Trump administration has reversed course, but the Congress needs to do more in making sure that we inscribe into law the equal rights of Christian colleges and universities so that no one is discriminated against on the basis of faith. Now, you've said several times, Dr. Lindsay, you've talked about loving your neighbor. I want to switch gears just a little bit and think about the crisis of anti-Semitism that is currently afflicting many universities and, frankly, many parts of this country. And what makes me think about this is I was having a conversation just the other day with a dear rabbi friend of mine who said to me something interesting, caught my attention. He made a reference to the book of Ruth in the Bible, and I happened to catch it. And so he said, you know, part of the challenge we face now is that so few people, so few students in particular, are taught any kind of biblical history. They're certainly not taught the history of Israel. They don't understand the spiritual foundations that link the people of Israel with the United States of America, our shared moral principles. Here's my question to you. Do you think that Christian colleges and universities have a special role to play now in rooting out this terror of anti-Semitism, this scourge of anti-Semitism, by recalling us to those things that we believe together, to our common moral principles, and also to those foundational commitments like love of neighbor that you've been talking about?
A couple of years ago, I had a chance to visit our honor students who were studying at Jerusalem University College. It's one of our partner institutions, literally built within the wall around Jerusalem. And getting a chance to see up close the Holy Land and to see the impact it was having on the lives of our students, I think really did change their understanding of the experience of Jewish people around the world. So part of what we want to try and do is to help our students to actually engage a much wider world, for them to understand friends and neighbors from a wide variety of backgrounds. And I think as you get to that, you move beyond just sort of a mediocre, small level kind of commitment of inclusion to actually pursuing an ethic of love and care.
Let me just, in my remaining seconds, put a little finer point on this. Wouldn't you agree, don't you think that Christians in particular have a particular obligation to stand up and speak against anti-Semitism and hatred of Jewish people? That is a particular obligation. I say this as a believer myself, that we cannot shirk or look aside from, but we have a particular obligation as people of the books, people of the Bible, to stand in solidarity and to say, we're against hate always, but we have a particular obligation to stand up and speak against anti-Semitism. Don't you think that's right?
Absolutely.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And now Senator Kane.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks to the witnesses. A personal story, a worry, and then a question. So, personal story, in hearing my colleague Senator Marshall talk about how community college was really important to his educational path, getting a good education and not going into too much debt. For me, it was dual enrollment. Being able to go through the University of Missouri, which was at the time relatively low-cost public institution, in 3 years rather than 4, was a really big deal for my family at that moment. And so there's no one-size-fits-all strategy around affordability. For some, it might be community college. For some, it's dual enrollment, for some it's Pell Grants, for some it's Stafford loans. It's just that we have to equip students and families much earlier. You have the capacity to get a great education. There's a lot of different ways to do it. So often parents and kids are getting into the college search process without really knowing the breadth of avenues they can use to achieve a high quality education at a cost that doesn't break the bank. So that's the story. The worry, my colleagues have shared worries about higher ed, whether it's anti-Semitism or other things. I'll tell you what my worry is. My biggest worry right now is if I look at the dismantling of the Department of Education, dramatic cuts in research funding going on in budgets that are being bandied about, dramatic cuts in funding to libraries, museums, and cultural institutions, elimination of funding to public broadcasting. Even outside the education space, directives to certain agencies like the National Weather Service and NOAA that have a lot of public information that they've been sharing with the public, like, hey, you shouldn't share it with the public, you should sell it. I'm a little bit worried that there's sort of a privatization of knowledge thing going on, and I am really, really worried about that knowledge could be available for those who can afford it, but not for those who can't. That worries me a lot. There's a famous phrase of Jefferson that is sort of paraphrased in the Virginia Constitution that says, progress in government and all else depends upon the broadest possible diffusion of knowledge among the general population. And that was part of a legislative bill that Jefferson proposed in 1779 for Virginia public school system that wasn't adopted, but the title and the philosophy was the way to preserve government and progress is to take knowledge and get it out in people's hands and diffuse it broadly among the public. That will be a counter to tyranny. That will be an accelerator of progress. And I worry that the combination of budget cuts and privatization of this and that is jeopardizing that. And so that's the worry I have. Here's my question, Dr. Larry Hart. I have been proposing during the tenures of now 3 presidents, Presidents Obama, President Trump, President Biden, President Trump, with vast bipartisan support, the notion that Pell Grants should not be confined purely to traditional college curriculum where there's a 15-week-long semester-like course, but that Pell Grants should be made available in a flexible way for high quality, got to define that, career and technical education. I've advocated that as the son of an iron worker who ran a vocational school in Honduras as a missionary teaching kids welding and carpentry, and I've also been advocating it as we've been doing manufacturing bills and we've been doing infrastructure bills. Who's going to make it? Who's going to build it? And yet, for 10 years since I first introduced this with Rob Portman, and now I've introduced it with a succession of others, recently with Senators Marshall and Collins and Senator Tina Smith, we get close, we kind of fall short, we get it through a committee, falls through on the House, happen on the House side, not on the Senate side, and again and again and again, we've fallen short on this. And I've kind of come to the conclusion that in addition to maybe I'm not as persuasive as I should be, so I have to own some of it, there's 2 other reasons. Number one, there's kind of a snobbishness about college in this place, that college is good and career and technical education is not so good. And I'm all for college, a proud University of Missouri grad, proud Harvard Law School grad, man, I'm all for college. But I'm also all for high quality career and technical education. And I don't think we should have policies like Pell Grant that advantage one and ignore the other. I'm happy to say that the chairman of the committee has been a co-sponsor in the past of this bill, the Jobs Act. Would it help your students? Would it help educate our population, Dr. Larry Hart, if we allowed flexibility and allowed Pell Grants to be used by students who are seeking high quality career and technical training?
Yes, profoundly. We've talked about, my typical student is named Ashley, and she's a 27-year-old single mother, raising a kid, working 2 part-time jobs. She needs that additional support to get a level 1 certificate that may be 15 hours, may take her 6 months to do, but there's a family-sustaining wage waiting for her on the other side of it that would change the path for her entire family and generations that follow. And I would just say, she deserves our advocacy. She deserves to be seen and cared for in the same level that my colleague students deserve, but she's often misunderstood and ignored.
I'm over my time, but Mr. Chair, as I yield back, I said there were 3 reasons I think this hasn't proceeded. Maybe I'm not as persuasive as I should be. I think there is a snobbishness about college that we ought to get over. And the third thing is we don't mark up a lot of legislation. And I really hope that we can start marking up legislation, particularly legislation like the Jobs Act, where there's such bipartisan support.
I want to mark up legislation, so look
Good,
forward.
good.
Senator Banks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Lindsay, in your opening remarks and your written statement, you talk about moral rot, and I wonder if you can just tell us again, what do you mean by that?
I think it's the erosion of basic human values that we have seen become sort of the standard and norm in a lot of higher education, which is entirely antithetical to the very purpose of what education is designed to do.
Where does it come from, though? Why do we see it fostered so heavily on college campuses in America?
Well, I think it's accretion because we are humans that make lots of mistakes, and we need to have guardrails that keep us from our worst sensibilities. So part of what we seek to try and do is to put ourselves in communities that can encourage us to pursue a virtuous life.
But what motivates it on a college campus?
I think that probably the important dimension that we want to try and do is create an academic community, an environment where we uphold values that we agree to. There has to be clarity. Institutions have to be able to say, this is what we stand for and this is who we are. A lot of higher education hasn't always been doing that. And we realize we may not be the right place for every student, so we want to try and recruit the right kind of students. And then we want to create an ecosystem where those kind of virtues can thrive and flourish.
I would assume that all of you here, every college president in America would agree that their overall mission is to prepare students for careers and make them good citizens, or prepare them to be better citizens of this great country. But why do so many colleges stray from that? I mean, what motivates it?
I think that probably the larger purposes that we're seeing, the noble cause of higher education, oftentimes it gets eroded when we get involved in the nitty-gritty of the regulatory environment and trying to respond to the economic challenges we face. I mean, all 3 of us would say we're working hard to try and make our institutions as affordable as possible, and it's hard work every single day. But it is those larger aims, those higher ideals that draw my colleagues and me to try and do everything we can to be able to serve our students more effectively. It's part of what gets me up in the morning.
To me, it almost feels like it's like a political movement, and we see it manifest itself in things like DEI, for example. And I wonder, you represent a very well-respected independent institution in my state, but who has rejected this political DEI movement. But why have so many colleges in America embraced it? Is it donor-driven? Is it pushed on you by institutions in the federal government? Is it tied to federal funding? I mean, what would motivate a DEI movement on college campuses, which seems antithetical to that mission that you just described?
Well, I can't really speak for what happens at other campuses, but I'll say, I mean, we love our diverse and global students, and that's been a part of who we are. You know, interesting story is that our very first international student was a guy named Sammy Morris. He was a Liberian prince who had to flee Liberia when there was a coup. And he turned to an American couple who he knew to say, is there a place where I could go? They happened to be Taylor graduates who were doing missions work, trying to help the people of Liberia. So they wrote to the president of Taylor and said, would you consider admitting this student? He's our first student of color. He was our first international student. But he became an exemplar for the rest of our campus. Sammy Morris's spirit sort of lives on our institution. And it sort of informs how we're trying to build the kind of community where all God's people are welcome at Taylor. And we recognize that we're there to be able to serve and bless. So Sammy Morris, he's a prince. He comes to Taylor. We didn't actually have a room for him to stay in. He said, give me the room that nobody wants to live in. That's where I want to stay. That kind of spirit of serving others above yourself was what he sort of held up as an exemplar, and it's become part of the spirit of our campus ever since.
I love that. I grew up in a trailer park in a small town in Indiana, son of a factory worker, and I worked hard just to get into college. And what I appreciate about Taylor University is you have the student, I hope, didn't get accepted because he was a prince, or because he was a foreign student, or because he was a minority student. I hope that he was accepted because of your merit-based approach to accepting students. And I wonder, can you talk about that? Taylor embracing more of a a merit-based approach than the DEI or the political approach to admissions?
I think it's super important that you find mission-appropriate students. And for us, that means they have to be academically strong. Our average high school GPA of the freshman class is 3.89. So we're really proud of the academic standards that we uphold at the university. And it helps us to realize we might not be the right place for every student, but for those who want to be at Taylor, we want to find a place for them.
Yeah, I think that's, when we talk about preparing students for their career, to be good citizens, I think that's really important, to reject the political approach and to accept students based on merit and give them that opportunity. And I think Taylor does that very well. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you, Senator Banks and Senator Blunt Rochester.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and to Ranking Member Sanders. And I, Mr. Chairman, will be looking at your transparency bill. I also want to acknowledge that in the House, I had the opportunity to lead on the short-term Pell bill, and I am hopeful that the Jobs Act will become the law of the land. And I want to thank our witnesses for being here as well. Thank you, Dr. Lindsay, especially for the comments that you just made about all of us being welcoming and all of us really uplifting each other. I think it's a comment that needs to be heard and spread far and wide. We all know that college isn't for everyone, nor is it necessary for everyone, but every student should have the opportunity to pursue higher education. Not only as the former Secretary of Labor of Delaware, who was focused on jobs of today and of the future, but also as a mom of two children who graduated from Delaware public schools and two HBCUs as well. I know a college degree can be incredibly valuable. Unfortunately, it appears that the administration is proposing stripping away some of the existing supports for students. Specifically, I'm incredibly disappointed that the president's budget proposes eliminating TRIO programs. TRIO programs provide support to low-income, first-generation students, students with disabilities, and veterans, helping them not only get in the door, but to succeed in college and in the workplace. These are programs with bipartisan support that help students create brighter futures for themselves through higher education, and it also makes us competitive globally. So far, more than 6 million students have graduated from college with TRIO's help. Dr. Lowry Hart, can you tell me how many students would lose access to support if TRIO was eliminated?
TRIO has almost 900,000 students currently enrolled in the support programs that TRIO offers.
And based on your experiences, what impact do TRIO programs have on students? Do you think eliminating TRIO would improve our higher education system?
It certainly wouldn't improve it at all. In fact, you have a demonstrative impact of TRIO programs, even in our own TRIO programs at Austin Community College, that reflect the data nationally. 83% of the students in our local area that are upward bound students enroll in a post-secondary entity. 47% of SSS students get a bachelor's degree compared to their peers that didn't have the same kinds of supports. It's, I'm looking at data, 47% of TRIO students are more likely to finish a 2-year degree and transfer to a bachelor's degree than students that have the same demographic background but don't have the same support that comes in the form of financial literacy, mentoring, academic skill building, career skill building, the very things that we've spent our time on this panel talking about. TRIO has already done historically and done well.
And so in the budget, the administration refers to TRIO as a relic of the past. I disagree. I think this was the 60th anniversary of TRIO this year. I think it was because we're close in age. And in fact, I think it's true. In fact, I just signed on to Chairman Cassidy and Senator Warnock's bipartisan funding request for TRIO. And to me, TRIO is not a nice thing to do. It's not just about it being a nice thing to do. This year alone, all high school seniors in Delaware, Delaware Technical Community College's TRIO programs will graduate. Again, that is staggering, and more than 95% of them will be attending college. Dr. Lowry Howard, do you think TRIO programs are a relic or are they relevant?
They're relevant.
Thank you for that answer. If we want a strong economy, we must invest in programs like TRIO that help real people access education and the tools they need to succeed. And I hope my colleagues see that these budget cuts would be harmful, not helpful, and that this program is not a relic, but is relevant to today. I yield back.
Senator Also Brooks.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. I'd like to just begin my comments also by saying thank you as well to Dr. Lindsay. Your words were so beautiful, and it reminds me of a scripture that says, "By this they will know that you are my disciples, if we love one another." And so I so appreciate your courageous comments pointing out today that we have an obligation to love each other, whether we are from here or any place else in the world. You know, God commands us to lead with love. So thank you so much for that. You know, I am disturbed and just so sad, really, at the climate that's been created by this administration, which pits people against each other, those who have had the opportunity to go to college and those who have not. I'm the daughter of two parents who did not have the opportunity to attend college, a mother who was a receptionist, and a father who worked so hard selling cars and newspapers in order that I might be educated. And I have to tell you, nobody's prouder. My father is the single most intelligent person I have ever met. Didn't have the chance to go to college, and I am so proud of him, and he is so proud of me. But it was both his work as a car salesman enabled me to become a United States Senator. And so I think it is important as we think through what higher education looks like, that we remember that it takes both, that those who have opportunities, we give them to them, and then we career and technical education and other forms of making it to the middle class are important. I want to just ask two quick questions. I know the time goes by quickly, and I want to thank all of the witnesses for being here today. Dr. Brown, I am glad that you are here so that we can hear the perspective of our HBCUs. And Maryland, as you know, is proud to host 4 HBCUs in our state. In fact, I'm looking forward to being the commencement speaker at Bowie State University this Friday. I'm also the mother of a proud daughter who is attending Spelman College. And so I'm looking forward to working with colleges across the aisle to preserve access to this critical funding. That being said, this administration took some concerning actions earlier this year, briefly suspending the 1890 National Scholars Program, which funds students' education in agriculture at HBCU. So I just wonder if quickly you can speak to the importance of preserving funding streams for our HBCUs.
Yes, Senator, thank you for that question, and it's vitally important. And I'll start first with the 1890 program, which is, Tuskegee is a recipient of the 1890 program. It not only serves the students there, but it serves the economy around that area, 200-mile radius. It's where we teach farmers, as an example, how to farm using solar energy and to do so year-round. But we do this with students who come to this by virtue of education, not by virtue of where they started in their life. So we have students, for example, who had never been on farms before. They grew up in Detroit. They got immersed on that, if you will, and decided to do that service. The 1890 program provides them scholarships in order to go to school, and then it provides them internships in programs like those here in Washington that allows them to become practitioners there. So the elimination of that program would not only hurt those students individually, it would also hurt all of the small farmers in programs within a 200-mile radius, in our case, of Alabama that would do that. Another instance would be our First Scientist program, which funds research on cancer, specifically ovarian cancer, prostate cancer, and other cancers that are specifically related to genes and the study of genes. That program, which is a part of a grant that has been canceled, causes us great concern. We partner with the University of Alabama, Birmingham in that research. Important for us to do it in the Black Belt of the South because that's where the disease happens to have the highest morbidity rates and other issues that affect not just those in that area, but across the country. So those funding streams are critically important, but not only to the student, they're important to the national interest when it comes to fighting problematic diseases, and also the economy, where we make a big difference by virtue of those programs.
Thank you so much. And I'll go quickly. I know this subject has been raised, Mr. Pierce. Can I just ask you quickly about Pell Grants? how important they are to so many students, and just ask you, what message do you think it sends to hardworking students when the federal government walks back its investment in Pell Grant funding?
Thank you, Senator. Pell Grants are absolutely vital for students from lower income communities to be able to go to college and achieve a college degree and participate in the economy. And I think the message is loud and clear that if we're going to cut back on Pell, we're not serious about making sure that college is open to everybody. We run the risk of America's colleges becoming finishing schools for millionaires and billionaires' kids instead of being the engine of opportunity that has driven our economy for a century.
Thank you so much. I yield back, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I want to thank all of our witnesses. I noticed that Republicans ask questions of Democratic witnesses and Democrats ask questions of Republican witnesses. And that shows that there was a broad interest in what everybody had to say as opposed to just merely kind of repeating partisan talking points. So I thank you all. I'll announce for my colleagues that questions for the records are due on June 4th at 5 p.m. I again thank you all, and this closes the hearing.